Let me tell you something that may shock you. The very thing you think is drawing people closer to you may be the very thing causing them to despise you. Kindness, when misplaced, can turn into the seed of disrespect. And many of you wonder why the more good you do, the less you are valued. It is not because kindness is wrong. It is because kindness without boundaries becomes an invitation for abuse. When you keep giving without measure, when you keep serving without discernment, when you keep lowering yourself in the name of love, people begin to read weakness where God intended strength. They begin to assume your patience is permission, your silence is surrender, and your humility is helplessness. Listen carefully, the problem is not your kindness. The problem is your attachment to the opinions and validation of others. You believe that if you stop giving, they will stop loving. But true strength is found in the power to detach, not from people, but from their approval. When your soul no longer depends on how they treat you, you rise above manipulation. Detachment is not cruelty. It is confidence. It is the declaration that your value does not decrease because someone else cannot see it. Detachment is the wisdom to say, I will give, but I will not be used. I will love, but I will not be abused. I will serve, but I will not be enslaved. People respect what they cannot control. The moment your kindness becomes predictable, without standards, without strength, it loses its weight. But when your kindness flows from confidence, it becomes a force of honor. For kindness with purpose commands respect. Kindness without purpose invites contempt. So hear me today. Stop allowing your goodness to be misread as weakness. Stop holding on to relationships that drain you simply because you fear rejection. Your worth is not in how much you give, but in the strength to walk away when giving no longer honors your calling. Kindness without boundaries breeds entitlement, and this is one of the most misunderstood truths about human relationships. Many people believe that the more they give, the more they will be loved, respected, and appreciated. But in reality, when kindness is not guarded by wisdom and standards, it becomes the soil where entitlement grows. It shifts the perception of others. What begins as a noble act of generosity slowly transforms into an expectation, and what was once celebrated becomes taken for granted. When people grow accustomed to your constant acheses, they stop valuing the cost of your sacrifice. They stop recognizing the weight of your love because what is always available, what is always accessible, begins to lose its value in their eyes. You see, human nature has a tendency to normalize what is consistent. The very act of kindness that once felt like a gift will begin to feel like a right. If you are always giving rides, always lending money, always making yourself available, always forgiving without accountability, people stop seeing you as a blessing and start seeing you as a resource. And when people see you as a resource, they stop respecting you as a person. This is the danger of kindness without boundaries. It is not that kindness is wrong. Kindness is a divine virtue, a reflection of God's own nature. But every virtue has to be guided by principle, otherwise it loses its divine intention. Love without truth becomes permissiveness. Mercy without justice becomes corruption. And kindness without boundaries becomes weakness. This is why some of the kindest people are also some of the most disrespected. They wonder why their love is not returned, why their generosity is abused, why their patience is trampled on. It is because they confuse constant giving with unconditional love. But the two are not the same. Unconditional love is rooted in principle and accountability, while constant giving is often rooted in fear and insecurity. Think about the law of supply and demand. When something is scarce, it is treas. When something is abundant without measure, it is taken lightly. Gold is precious because it is rare. Diamonds are valuable because they are not found on every street corner. But air, as essential as it is free and everywhere. And because it is everywhere, people don't think about it, don't treasure it, don't protect it until it is threatened. The same principle applies to kindness. If you keep giving without limit, people will breathe you in like air and forget that your presence is a gift. Boundaries are what protect the dignity of your kindness. Boundaries are what ensure that your giving continues to carry weight. For example, a parent who always gives their child everything they want without correction raises. Not a grateful child, but an entitled one. That child begins to see generosity as normal and discipline as cruelty. Why? Because there was no boundary to frame the meaning of kindness. In the same way, when you give to people constantly without discernment, they say, Help seeing your actions as gifts and start seeing them as obligations. Many times the reason people disrespect you is not because they are evil, but because you train them to expect without gratitude. You train them to receive without recognition. You train them to think that your yes is automatic, that your patience is endless, and that your love requires no accountability. And once they are trained that way, your kindness is no longer kindness in their eyes. It is duty. They feel entitled to it. And entitlement always destroys respect. Let me go deeper. The reason this happens is because of a spiritual law. Whatever you fail to define, others will define for you. If you fail to define the purpose of your kindness, people will define it as weakness. If you fail to define your limits, people will define them for you by taking more than they should. If you fail to define your worth, people will measure it by how much of yourself you are willing to give away without demand. That is why boundaries are not barriers, they are definitions. They define who you are, what you value, and how far you are willing to go. Without them, your kindness becomes undefined, and undefined kindness is always misused. Some of you have stayed in relationships far longer than you should have because you believed that if you just kept giving, the other person would eventually value you. But what you did not realize is that every act of giving without boundary was training them to take more and more until your soul was drained. You thought your kindness would earn their respect, but instead it invited their disregard, because people don't respect what they can control. And uncontrolled kindness is the easiest thing to manipulate. Consider this, even God himself, who is the embodiment of kindness, sets boundaries. His mercy is everlasting, but his patience has conditions. His love is unconditional, but his fellowship requires obedience. He gives freely, yet he withholds when bound are. E's are crossed. If God in his perfection governs kindness with principles and standards, why do you believe you can give without boundaries and still expect respect? Respect is birthed out of recognition of value, and value is always preserved by boundaries. When kindness lacks boundaries, it not only breeds entitlement in others, it breeds resentment in you, because eventually the weight of being used will catch up with your heart. You will feel drained, unappreciated, and bitter. You will start to despise the very people you were trying to help. And what was meant to be an act of love becomes the seed of anger. That is why many people who once had hearts of compassion eventually grow cold. It was not because their kindness was wrong, it was because their kindness was unprotected. So the principle is this: kindness must flow out of strength, not fear. It must be guarded by wisdom, not insecurity. When you know who you are, you can give without being diminished. You can love without being used. You can serve without being enslaved. And the people around you will learn to respect not only your kindness, but also the strength that protects it. Because true kindness is not in saying yes to everything. It is in knowing when to say no. Respect is sustained not by what you give, but by what you refuse to tolerate. This is one of the most profound truths about human interaction. Yet it is one that many overlook in their pursuit of love, acceptance, and validation. People often believe that generosity, kindness, and constant availability will secure the respect of others. They think that if they give more, if they serve more, if they bend further, they will be honored more. But respect does not grow in the soil of endless giving. It grows in the soil of boundaries. What defines how people treat you is not how much you do for them, but how much you are willing to say no to. Respect is not a product of abundance. It is a product of limitation. The moment you allow others to cross your lines without consequence, you teach them that those lines never existed. And once people learn they can step over your boundaries, they will not stop. They will continue to test, to push, and to stretch until there is nothing left of you. It is not the giving that creates respect. It is the refusal to compromise your dignity, your standards, and your values that commands it. Think of a river. A river is beautiful because it flows within its banks. The water has power because it is guided, contained, and defined. If the banks collapse, the river becomes a flood. The same water that once gave life now destroys everything in its path. Your life, your kindness, your generosity must have banks. They must have boundaries that define how far they go. Without them, what should bless others will end up drowning you, and people do not respect floods. They fear them, resent them, or try to escape them. But when water is controlled, when it is guided, it becomes a source of power and honor. This is why some of the most generous people are often the least respected. They think their endless sacrifices will earn them value, but people do not value sacrifice without strength. They may enjoy the benefits of what you give, but they will not respect you if you have no limits. Because respect is not about what you provide, it is about what you protect. When you protect your dignity, your time, your worth, and your calling, others begin to honor the weight of your presence. Every relationship is tested by the question of tolerance. How much will you allow? How much will you accept? How much will you excuse? The answers to those questions decide whether people treat you with honor or with contempt. If you tolerate disrespect, disrespect will grow. If you tolerate neglect, neglect will become normal. If you tolerate abuse, abuse will become expected. Silence in the face of dishonor is agreement, and agreement with dishonor always erodes respect. Let me go deeper. Respect is not sustained by what you demand verbally. It is sustained by what you enforce practically. You can tell people to respect you all day long, but if your actions contradict your words carry no power. Respect is not negotiated, it is demonstrated. It is shown in your refusal to stay where you are not valued. It is revealed in your decision to walk away when your presence is taken for granted. It is embodied in the choices you make when others test your boundaries. That is why people will often test you not to see what you give, but to see what you refuse. What you refuse tells them who you really are. Even God himself sustains respect not by what he gives, but by what he refuses. He gives freely, but he does not tolerate rebellion without consequence. He blesses abundantly, but he does not excuse sin without justice. His respect is sustained by his standards. If the creator of heaven and earth governs relationships through both mercy and discipline, then why do you think you can sustain respect through giving alone? Without standards, your giving becomes cheap, and cheap things are never honored. Think about a workplace. An employee who constantly does the work of others, takes on every extra task, and never says no might be seen as helpful, but rarely are they respected. Why? Because they tolerate exploitation. The leader who commands respect is not the one who does everything for everyone, but the one who sets clear expectations, upholds principles, and enforces consequences. In life, as in leadership, respect is not earned by what you allow. It is earned by what you protect. Tolerance has a language, and people read it fluently. When you remain silent while others mistreat you, they hear you saying, "Thus is acceptable." When you allow repeated offenses without change, they hear you saying, "This is normal." When you stay present in spaces that diminish you, they hear you saying, "This is my worth." And once they believe that is your worth, will never treat you higher than the standard you set. This is why it is possible for someone to love you but not respect you. Love may be inspired by what you give, but respect is inspired by what you refuse to compromise. People can love your kindness while still disregarding your value. They can enjoy your generosity while still ignoring your dignity, because love is drawn to benefits, but respect is drawn to boundaries. The tragedy is that many people settle for being loved without being respected. They cling to relationships where they are needed but not honored. They confuse being wanted for what they provide with being valued for who they are. And because they are afraid to lose the love, they refuse to confront the disrespect. But hear me, love without respect is not love at all. True love recognizes and honors value. True love does not demand you to lower yourself to be accepted. Respect is not sustained in abundance. It is sustained in scarcity. It is sustained when you say, "I will not give beyond this point. I will not allow beyond this line. I will not remain beyond this boundary." It is sustained when you choose dignity over desperation, when you choose principle over people-pleasing, when you choose self-respect over acceptance. For every time you refuse to tolerate dishonor, you are teaching people how to value you, and people will always treat you according to the lesson you teach. So the secret is not in giving more, but in tolerating less. It is not in bending further, but in standing firmer. It is not in expanding endlessly, but in defining clearly. The respect you desire is not hidden in how much you provide. It is hidden in how much you protect. For what you protect tells the world what you are worth, and the world will never treat you higher than the worth you declare through your boundaries.